Should we go for broke? Should I should I just unplug it? I think I should. Instead of simulating it, let's do it for real. So I'm gonna pull the plug on this one. Let's see. We see a couple of timeouts. 3, 4, and there we go. We're back online. So Ubiquiti has finally released an upgrade to the UniFi Dream Machine Pro, and it's the UniFi Dream Machine Pro Max. The UDM Pro Max has been upgraded in almost every way possible, bringing more performance, more capacity, more throughput, and even more redundancy. This redundancy comes in a few forms, like an additional NVR drive bay for Protect, and another is the new Shadow Mode, which lets you fail over to another UDM Pro Max, but we'll get into that later. So how much faster is the UDM Pro Max than the UDM Pro? What is Shadow Mode, and can it really fail over without any intervention? And who is this for, and is it really an upgrade? We'll cover all of this and the network throughput of the UDM Pro Max to see how much performance we're really gaining. Now, Ubiquiti did send me a pair of UDM Pro Maxes to test out their new Shadow Mode feature, full disclosure, and I'm also an alpha tester to provide feedback on some of their new products like Shadow Mode and UniFi OS 4, which will be released soon, but they did not pay me any money or anything like that. So before we get into the specs, I think I should let you know that this retails for $599. I wanted to let you know that up front so you can determine if it's a good value as you hear about what this device is capable of. So what are the specs of the UDM Pro Max and what was upgraded from the UDM Pro? First up is the CPU, and it's using a quad-core ARM Cortex at 2 GHz, which explains some of the performance boosts we'll see a little bit later on. It also has 8 GB of DDR4 RAM, which is double the UDM Pro, and double the eMMC storage at 32 GB, and an additional 128 GB SSD built in for storage and applications, and something that the UDM Pro doesn't even have. It also has two 3.5-inch hard drive bays instead of the one that the UDM Pro has, which means now that you can have a set of hard drives set up in RAID 1, giving you protection against data loss. As soon as you plug in the second drive, the UDM Pro Max will configure it in basic protection, meaning RAID 1, which mirrors the drives, and although your total capacity is cut in half, you can lose up to one drive and still have all of your data. It will then start synchronizing the drives and preparing the array, but you will be able to use Protect immediately without worrying about the sync process. This can take some time depending on the size of the drives you use. As far as network interfaces go on the LAN side, it has 8 1 gigabit ports on the front, so no real change here. And although it has Pro Max in the name, unfortunately, none of these ports have Ether lighting. Maybe in the next version? And like the UDM Pro, it also has the 10 gig SFP Plus port. Coming over to the WAN side, we can see that it now has a 2.5 gigabit port, an upgrade from the 1 gigabit port we had in the UDM Pro, and again, another 10 gig SFP Plus port on the WAN. Now, even though these ports are labeled LAN and WAN, you can easily change these interfaces in the unified network controller to any combination of LAN and WAN you want, even supporting a secondary WAN 2 interface for failover internet or distributed load balancing between the two LANs. Now, those are the hardware specs, and remember that this hardware drives all of the software in the UDM Pro Max, like network controller, that will continually enhance this product over time. And the same goes for Access, Talk, Connect, Interspace, and any other application they release in the future. Now, I haven't used any of these other applications besides Protect on my MVR, which, like the network controller, is pretty polished and gets updates all the time. One of the features that will be released with the UDM Pro Max is Shadow Mode. Now, you may have heard of this already, being supported on UDM Pros and UDM SEs that would sync with your existing UDM, but still needed manual intervention to fully cut over to the Shadow UDM. That's been dramatically improved with the UDM Pro Max. When you pair it with another UDM Pro Max, you can run it as a hot spare or warm spare, and you'll see what I mean here in a second. To start the Shadow Mode setup, visit the OS settings page and connect your WAN port from the secondary UDM to the LAN port on the primary UDM. As soon as the primary UDM Pro Max detects another UDM Pro Max, it will light up. As soon as you click Setup, you can now have a cold spare that can be swapped with the primary, just like previous versions of the UDM Pro and UDM SE. But now with the UDM Pro Max, you can take that even further by setting up automatic failover. Once you enable automatic failover, it will start a sequence of steps to make your gateway fail over if the device becomes unreachable. The first step is connecting port 7 on both gateways. Then it sets up the HA cluster. After that, it will ask you to remove the LAN to WAN connection and replace it with your ISP's WAN connection. Next, it will ask you to connect the Shadow Gateway to the local network, mirroring the cabling for the primary gateway, basically asking you to connect the primary and the Shadow to the same downstream switch. For me, I connected each gateway's 10 gig LAN port to my UDM Pro Max's switch 10 gig LAN port. And just like that, your secondary UDM Pro Max is ready to take over if the primary fails. The Shadow Gateway will sync with the primary gateway every few minutes. I like that they added this to the LCD screen so that everyone servicing the equipment will know right away which one is the Shadow and which one is the primary. I also wish they would add an icon to the primary as well. Once that's set up, we can now simulate a failure. Now I have two UDM Pro Maxes. They're already paired in HA mode and they're already connected and ready to go. And so I have this laptop connected into this switch, and this switch is downstream of both of these UDM Pro Maxes. So the idea is if I pull this one, that everything should fail over, including the switch, to the second UDM Pro Max, and everything should just start working. So first, I'm going to ping something. Let's ping Cloudflare, make sure we have a connection. So I'm pinging Cloudflare. Now we need to simulate an outage. Should we go for broke? Should I just unplug it? I think I should. Okay, so let's simulate an outage. Let me make sure I'm gonna pull the plug on the right one. So instead of simulate it, let's do it for real. So I'm gonna pull the plug on this one. Let's see, we see a couple of timeouts. 3, 4, and there we go. We're back online. So we did see a couple of request timeouts, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but you can see that it failed over within 10 seconds. So that's pretty cool. So it failed over. And you could also see here on the Shadow UDM Pro Max is that it says it's failover activating. So it's activating failover. I think what it's doing right now is what we talked about a little bit earlier, is it's restoring all of those applications, and they should be here online shortly. So that's how Shadow Mode works on the UDM Pro Max. It's now restoring all of these applications. You could see we have an internet connection, and those applications should be restored shortly. And if we want to go back to the primary UDM Pro Max, all we have to do is bring this one back up online, and it should then seamlessly fail back over to the primary. Now, I bet you're wondering about the applications. It seems like the way that this works is that the WAN connection immediately cuts over, and then they run a restore to get all of your applications to the Shadow UDM. Now, you might be wondering, what about the MVR footage and drives for Protect? Well, if you want your recordings to be continuous, it doesn't exactly work that way. You can't sync your footage to the Shadow UDM, so there's no need to populate these drives. Well, at this point, you have two options. Either move the drives to the Shadow UDM and promote it to primary, or leave the drives in the primary UDM until it can be fixed. I do wish we had the option to also sync the Protect footage and seamlessly fail over to the Shadow UDM that has drives populated, but I can see how this would be really complicated to develop. But I think there is an appetite for it. So once you're in this state with the Shadow Gateway, keeping the network up, you get to choose how you want to handle this. If you reconnect the primary now, all changes will be reverted when it comes up. And depending on how long the primary will be down, this might not be what you want. So you can promote the Shadow to primary, which will remove the old UDM from the console, and you'll just need to set up Shadow Mode all over again once you get the replacement for the old primary. Otherwise, if the primary was only temporarily down, once it reconnects to the network, it will become the primary again. So all of this is great, but it's a combination of hardware and software that makes a good product. So how well does it perform? Well, I decided to do a little testing to see if I could verify some of the marketing specs and a few other scenarios to satisfy my own curiosity about this device and some of its throughput. Now, all of these tests were done on a combination of Windows, Mac, and even Linux machines I had here in my office. As I mentioned before, I'm running an alpha version of the UniFi OS, version 4.02, which isn't released yet, as well as an early release of the UniFi network controller. And all of these tests were done on this lab network, which includes two UDM Pro Maxes, a UniFi Pro Max switch, and a UniFi Flex 10G, all of which are on alpha firmware. So needless to say, these numbers could change in the future with updates. First up, I wanted to test 10 gig throughput with and without DPI and IPS, which is named suspicious activity in the security section, and with and without inter VLAN routing to see how fast we can transfer data. In this scenario, the Mac Studio was connected at 10 gig and acted as the server running iPerf 3, and the Windows 11 machine was connected at 10 gig and acted as a client running on WSL, well, because the Windows native version is very bad and a lot slower. Both devices were connected via Ethernet to the 10 gig ports with an SFP Plus to RJ45 adapter, and both ports were remapped to LAN. The first test was 10 gig LAN to 10 gig LAN on the same VLAN and without DPI and IPS turned on. This performed as you would expect. Almost the full 10 gig was available with 8.65 gigabits per second on average. The next test was to isolate DPI and IPS. So 10 gig LAN to 10 gig LAN on the same VLAN with DPI and IPS turned on, and that resulted in 4.65 on average. This is really close to the 5 gigabits per second that's advertised and 1.5 gigabits per second more than the UDM Pro. The next test was just to test inter-VLAN routing. So this was 10 gig LAN to 10 gig LAN on different VLANs with DPI and IPS turned off. This resulted in 6.4 gigabits per second on average, which was much higher than the UDM Pro. Now, I don't think these numbers were published for the UDM Pro, but in my testing quite some time ago, this was almost 3 gigabits per second faster than the UDM Pro. The last test for 10 gig was really turning up the heat on the CPU by testing both inter-VLAN routing along with DPI and IPS turned on. This is a double hit on the CPU. So on this test, both were on 10 gig LAN with clients on different VLANs and DPI and IPS turned on, and it averaged around 1.84 gigabits per second. Now, I don't have any numbers from the UDM Pro, but based on all of these other results, I think it's safe to say that this is probably higher. I also tested the 8-port switch in front, and Ubiquiti did confirm that this was unchanged from the UDM Pro, and I did get the same exact results. Each port is able to switch at 1 gigabit up and down, and the switch itself can switch more than 1 gigabit, as I tested with multiple clients, but as soon as you go from the switch and you cross over to the LAN or WAN port, that connection is limited at 1 gigabit per second. And I tested with the same VLAN, different VLANs, IPS and IDS turned on and off, and it made no difference whatsoever. Now, I can understand why people might be concerned with this. However, at least in my use case and for anything that's meant to manage thousands of devices, I think that most are going to connect a switch to the UDM Pro Max to manage those devices where this really isn't an issue. That being said, I have connected devices to my UDM SE switch, but in most cases I was just connecting a camera or servers that didn't need more than 1 gig, or just using it as a service port when I needed to connect to the internet or service that device directly. That being said, it is what it is, and I'm glad I finally understood what people were talking about on the internet, and I guess the moral of the story is this switch is unchanged. Now, one thing I didn't get to test was the WAN connection using the application firewall. This device should be able to push a full 10 gigabits per second with the application firewall turned on. So why didn't I get to test it? Well, I don't have a 10 gig WAN here at home, and I couldn't think of a good way to test this in my network home lab. I have plenty of 10 gig ports on my switch, but couldn't come up with a way to test it. If you can think of a way I can test this in the future, definitely let me know in the comments because I would love to know. After using and testing the UniFi Pro Max over the last week, I can say it's considerably faster than the UDM Pro and the UDM SE in almost every way. It's nice that it now comes with 2 drive bays to keep your Protect data safe, and it has a way to fail over to another UDM Pro Max, improving shadow mode from previous generations. I do wish that there was another use case for these drives for those that don't use Protect, especially now that it comes with a 128 gig SSD for apps, but for the foreseeable future, it looks like that's all it will be used for. So who is this for? Well, I think there are a few groups of people that this is targeted for. There are those who want an all-in-one device like a UDM Pro, but want data protection by having a second drive. Basically, continuity on their data. Then I think there are those who want continuity that Shadow Mode offers when you pair 2 of these, so continuity on their internet. And I think that both of these groups of people want to keep their business running and turn what would have been an emergency situation into a normal support call that they can handle during normal business hours. Then there are those who just want the performance upgrade and see the dual drive bays and the 2.5 gigabit NIC as a bonus. And to them, this device seems to be the most performant UDM in the lineup until whenever the next generation of devices come. There are a few things I called out throughout this video that I would like to see changed in the future, and since they are seemingly software related, maybe they will be changed. Not sure. However, in general, I try to think of it like this. I don't buy products that come with a promise of improvements, but I buy products that I am happy with when they are released, like when I bought my UDM Pro or my Switch Pro or any other product, Ubiquiti or not, that I'm happy with the features they ship on launch day, and anything else they add over time is just a bonus. And I think Ubiquiti did make some promises that they are delivering on the day that the UDM Pro Max launches. I'm Tim. Thanks for watching.